Hello, Internet denizens. Today, I'm going to talk about the joys of Hackintoshing. Hello, Internet denizens. Welcome back. And this is the joy of Hackintoshing. I just updated my computer this morning from Sierra to High Sierra and then applied the latest patch, which as of this video was 10.13.6, and it's still working. That brings me joy. Now, that isn't to say that I didn't have to update a whole bunch of software components ahead of time, and then when I booted into the latest version of the High Sierra, I did get 2 yellow screens. But it was an easy fix, and I feel joyful that it's working. Yes, of course. Yes, I know. Most Mac users out there, I'm looking at you, just hit the update button and it updates for you magically and it brings you joy. I'm glad it brings you joy. But there are several Mac user friends of mine out there that when they do hit the update button, it doesn't work. And because I have a slightly deeper knowledge of how the Mac OS works, I'm able to fix it. And that brings me joy. I'm a problem solver. And the fact that Hackintoshes sometimes give me a hard time and don't always work actually brings me joy. Don't ask. I build Macintoshes with my son. That brings me joy. We talk about the latest CPUs, motherboards, GPUs, even power supplies. That brings me joy. I like going into the local computer parts store and see fathers and daughters even searching around for parts, deciding what their latest computer build is going to be. It brings me joy to see that computer building is not just a father and son thing. That being said, my wife would rather stay in the car than come into the computer store with my son and myself. Of course, I will tell you quite honestly that I would rather have my eyes gouged out than going into Sephora with my daughter and my wife. Yes, I'm going to miss out on the latest eyeshadow or lip gloss or something. I don't know. I can upgrade my RAM, power supply, graphics card, CPU anytime that I want. That gives me joy. I get 100% of my computing dollars money's worth. I can take these discarded computer parts and build another computer, maybe even a NAS for the household. I'm recycling. I'm not putting computer parts into landfill. That gives me joy. I can easily open up my Hackintosh and clean them. That gives me joy. My son makes fun of the fact that we don't get AAA games, if at all, on the Mac. I guess that gives me joy. I have a Mac OS computer that can actually burn DVDs and CDs. Shocking! I have ports on the front of my computer. That brings me joy. I love the Mac OS. That gives me joy. Ironically, one of the things that Hackintosh users deeply understand intrinsically is that it's the OS, stupid. While Apple is off building this magical Mac Pro that's going to be showing up in 2019, we have no idea, what it's going to do. For us, it's amazing that you can just take this box of PC parts, add the Mac OS to it, and it's transformative. I mean, for me, every time I power up, my Hackintosh, it's kind of cool to see the Mac OS come up on a non-Mac computer. It's weird and delicious and cool all at the same time. It seems wrong, outerworldly, but it's delicious. I love it. It brings me joy. Running a Hackintosh means that you are running the Mac OS in its purest state. You're not being distracted by, super thin aluminum chamfered edge computers made by 100-year-old Himalayan virgins. We're not screaming at Apple for removing FireWire or DVD and CD burning. We can add it whenever we want. We can create the computer that we need that runs the software that we're using the way we want to run it. Why on earth Apple continues to compromise its own OS is a complete mystery. But for me, to tell you the truth, I've gotten kind of addicted to building Hackintoshes. We'll see if Apple produces something that brings me back into their hardware sphere. But for the moment, I love building them with my son. It gives my wife another excuse to yell, I thought you said you were going to be upstairs an hour ago. Yes, the joys of Hackintoshing. And finally, I got this comment on one of my Hackintoshing videos from a fellow named Full Albums. Well, Mr. Albums, I quote, "Those videos just prove that Hackintosh users are most bitter of them all. Mac users just use Macs knowing they're not the fastest or the cheapest out there, but don't care about those things. Windows users want fast, modular, and that's fine. But Hackintosh users? Constant moaning about Apple business and design choices, know-it-all attitude, trying to monetize on their own bad life choices. Using Final Cut on a Hackintosh is bad life choice in my opinion. Just move on with your life. You're too excited for a tool." Now, is he saying that I am a tool or that I'm too excited about using a tool? Also, I would never hire anyone working on a Hackintosh. It's not even legal. Okay, that's a very interesting perspective. To answer some of the points, I don't think Hackintosh users are bitter. At least, I'm not. I'm disappointed that Apple is not building the computer that I want at this juncture. And as I mentioned in another video, I categorize Hackintosh users into 3 categories. Number 1, people who would never buy a Mac under any circumstances. Number 2, people who can no longer afford a Macintosh. And number 3, people who believe that Apple is not making the Mac that they need at that time. And I happen to follow in that category, number 3. So I completely understand that writer's point that using a Hackintosh for professional purposes like Final Cut, it's very much living on the knife's edge. I understand. I've also addressed that. I've had no issues running Mac software except for when I was running Adobe crap, and then once I removed that, I've had no crashes ever since. Hackintoshing is not trivial. Not hiring someone who is using a Hackintosh, well, okay, that's a fair point. I totally understand that. As far as legality, I'm allowed to download the Mac OS on a legal Macintosh computer, of which I still have several, but the ULA says that I'm not allowed to apply that OS to a non-Mac computer. That being said, when the famous Mac Fix-It guru, Louis Rossmann, fixes on a board level a MacBook, Apple no longer deems it a Mac. It is now a PC. Just because he exchanged one capacitor for another capacitor, that Apple no longer considers that a bona fide Mac. So I don't know what to say about that. You be the judge. And finally, with all the horrible nonsense that's happening all over the world, what's wrong with a little joy of Hackintoshing? Till next time, Internet denizens, so long.